Hello, everyone. We'll just take one more minute while the audience comes in, the participants come in, and then we'll get started. Thanks for joining us today. Hello, everyone. Welcome to From City Hall to City Streets, how local leaders and practitioners are helping young people in the COVID-19 era. My name is Sana Segbedzi. I'm the coordinator of the Champion Mayors for Inclusive Growth Initiative at the OECD. And it's a coalition of 60 mayors who are committed to tackling inequality and advancing inclusive growth. I'm delighted to open this special edition of the Champion Mayors Initiative's Inequality Matters webinar series during OECD Youth Week and in partnership with the OECD Local Development Forum. In May 2021, Champion Mayors renewed their commitment to inclusive growth through the Champion Mayors Pledge for Youth for an Inclusive Post-COVID Recovery. They pledged to work closely with communities, organizations, and other levels of government to upscale their efforts and to support youth who have been severely impacted by the COVID-19 crisis, and to ensure a resilient and inclusive recovery for this generation. The OECD Local Development Forum is a network of thousands of local development practitioners worldwide and is another venue for the OECD to keep its ear on the ground and to identify local innovations and best practices in empowering youth. Today, we bring these two networks together to join a conversation between champion mayors and local youth practitioners working on efforts taking place from city halls to city streets to empower youth during the COVID-19 era. We will explore how local governments are ensuring better access for youth to local services, economic opportunities, and actions that expand their participation in the public life, reflecting the three recommendations of the pledge. OECD research has shown that the COVID-19 exacerbated existing social and economic challenges faced by young people. For instance, youth unemployment picked up 1 percentage point at the start of the crisis in OECD countries. In addition, the pandemic has disproportionately impacted young people in already precarious situations, including young people from low-income backgrounds, migrant families, young people with disabilities, and young parents. Since the beginning of the pandemic, the OECD has been keeping tabs on cities' policy responses and has collected over hundreds of interventions of how cities managed the COVID pandemic, and especially through the Champion Mayors Coalition. And in collecting these interventions, we found that youth was a particular demographic of importance to many of our administrations, and that they were putting efforts forward from equipping youth with technology so that they could continue to learn and have access to lessons from school, to setting up savings programs to help weather this financial difficult period, to ensuring that youth can access lower rents and reduced fares. You can find all these examples and more in the city's COVID-19 policies note that's linked in through the chat. But now, as we're all preparing for recovering from the COVID crisis, this is an opportunity for the Great Reset towards greener, resilient, healthier, and inclusive cities. So the biggest opportunity emerging from cities post-pandemic or in the pandemic era is to build a way that is in favor of an inclusive recovery that is able to lift up all communities within our cities. To help explore how local leaders and representatives from champion mayor cities and practitioners are supporting youth in the long-term recovery plans, we are delighted to have with us today 5 esteemed panelists. Champion Mayor Peter Danielsson from Helsingborg, Thomas Rogé, head of the Youth Policy Department in the city of Paris.
Hello.
Youth Mayor John Wayman from Bristol, UK.
Hiya.
Denis Leamy, CEO of the Cork Education and Training Board in Ireland and chair of OECD's Local Employment and Economic Development Committee.
Hi, everyone.
And Marita Raisanen, coordinator of One Stop Shop Guidance Center for Youth in Jyväskylä, Finland.
Good afternoon.
Before we begin, just a few housekeeping notes. This session is being recorded and will be linked through to the Champion Mayor's website. Please use the chat function if you need any technical support. And please, we invite you to direct your questions to the speakers through the Q&A platform. And also, please feel free to engage with us via Twitter using the handle @OECD_local and tag #ChampionMayors. So let's begin with our first speaker, Mayor Danielsson. Mayor Danielsson has been mayor of Helsingborg since 2006, where he is strongly committed to developing sustainable and a smart city of the future. Quality of life and innovation-driven development is on the top of his agenda. Mayor Danielsson has prioritized enabling young people to take an active part in shaping the city's future through the About Me digital tool, as well as Helsingborg's Vision Fund, which aims to cultivate the landscape of change in the city from the bottom up. Mayor Danielsson, OECD data shows that 4 out of 10 young people ages 18 to 29 feel that the government doesn't incorporate their views when designing or reforming public benefits and services. How are you leveraging the potential of the digital technology and innovation to enhance youth participation in your city?
First, thank you for the invitation to be a part of this webinar on this very important topic. The fact that our youth feel that they are not being listened to is a critical issue that we need to address together. In Helsingborg, policies and all our programs have an overarching goal that is to ensure that the city's people experience high quality of life. The concept of quality of life is strongly connected with the feeling of being able to pursue your dreams and being respected for your opinion. And if you lose the belief that your opinion is of value to the society, you lose your sense of belonging and trust in society. And that is very bad. So we try to always include young people in developing processes, projects, and activities aimed at this group. We also work with youth councils and with mentorship programs within our different political parties. And I believe it's our duty to ensure that young people have the tools they need to not only be heard and get involved, but actually have an active role in the city's governance. And innovation is a key aspect of our extensive work to transform the city into an enabler rather than simply a provider of service. And in this work, we not only focus on the why, but also on the how, and maybe most important, the who. We want to involve young people in making Helsingborg a better city. We know that the people of Helsingborg are change drivers, especially the young people of our city. And that's why we have created this Vision Fund. And it's a fund that residents can apply money from in order to pursue their ideas and make Helsingborg a better place. And it enables people to try new things and take an active part in the city's future by doing something that really matters for them. And the fund, through the fund, we fund smaller projects up to 10,000 euros. And since the start of the Vision Fund in 2014, over 100 ideas has been implemented by citizens. And all these projects have in different ways contributed to the development of Helsingborg to a more inclusive and more sustainable and smart city. But even as important, the Vision Fund signals to the local community and especially to the young people in the city that their ideas matter and have a value for our society. And on the point of how we utilize new technology and enhance participation, we have many examples of this, but let me share one with you where we collaborate with other municipalities and a tech company to pilot a mobile application called About Me. About Me is a digital tool for children and young people to express their feelings and state of mind, and for adults to understand their perspectives. The questions are easy to understand, and the app compiles and anonymizes the data. And this app can be used to develop the support work within schools, the social services, the psychiatric services, and to engage young people in the continuous dialogue with the city. Finally, I'm proud to say that our city has a work culture where it's encouraged to open up and try new things together with our residents, both young and older. And this is the basic requirement, I think, for a city that has quality of life as a primary goal. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Mayor Danielsson. We'd certainly like to hear more about me later. And you mentioned a very interesting fact about capturing the state of mind of youth. And this is definitely important, especially as we found that mental health issues and loneliness was above average in youth during the crisis. So thank you for sharing. Now let's turn to our second speaker, Thomas Rogé, the head of the Youth Policy Department for the City of Paris. Thomas has worked for several years on youth and education issues in the association sector and is a political advisor at the French Ministry of National Education before joining the City of Paris. In his current role, he's in charge of designing and implementing youth policies at the local level. Thomas, could you share light on the city's initiatives undertaken by Mayor Hidalgo to improve the economic and life outcomes for at-risk youth?
Thank you, Rosanna. I'm sorry, first I must say I'm not very at ease in English, so please be kind. I will try to make me understand, and if you have any question, I will be glad to try to answer them. Like everywhere, even in a big city and rich city like Paris, the crisis has took a toll, a very big toll on young people, and young Parisians have been affected by unemployment, loss of opportunities to take a new job, to finance studies. We needed to take some actions in Paris to address that. So just to illustrate with a few examples of what we did in Paris during the crisis, we have a network of municipal facilities for young people in Paris, and nearly 60 facilities for young people, and we they keep at all time, even when we were confined in Paris. They keep in touch with young people on internet, on social networks, and some of them keep open to offer computers for young people who needed them to take their online courses. So it was a very important way to keep in touch with young people, because isolation was very hard during the crisis and especially during the confinement. And we financed some peer-to-peer support system during the crisis, especially in helping student organization to implement some solidarity actions like food distribution for young people and students. And we help 16 distributions with more than 5,000 users, young beneficiaries each week. And it was an important part of the support system we built during the crisis. And we also reinforced all the actions we did on mental health. We helped some professionals, some peer-to-peer support system to listen to the difficulties, to help young people to have somebody to speak about what they meet in the daily basis, and it was an important part of what we do. And we were very we worked very hard toward the end of the crisis. We're still in the crisis, but we deconfined in a few weeks ago. We were very. We thought it was very important to give some positive message to young people this summer. So we helped them to access to culture, to sports, to go to vacations, and we built a very important actions this summer to help them to end, in a way, the crisis. So a lot of initiatives, and a lot of them were not from the administration of the city, not from the public service, but from young people themselves. And it was a very important way to think about young people not only as users or beneficiaries of public service, but also like a very important part of the solutions. It was a very important thing for us.
Thank you, Thomas. And you picked up on some of the themes of Mayor Danielsson and what we'll be exploring later on checking in with youth, seeing where they are. And no matter what size city you are, big, small, rich, well-connected, youth actually were impacted completely. Next, we have the youth mayor, John Wayman, from the city of Bristol. John is one of 2 youth mayors of Bristol and sits on the Bristol Youth Council. He was elected in 2019 through the Bristol Big Youth Vote to offer the city's young people a voice in the future of Bristol, and also co-chairs the Children and Young People's Board. Bristol's youth mayors were involved in a recent survey of local young people on the impact of COVID-19. John, what were some of the key issues that came out of it, and what concrete actions are you taking to respond to these needs?
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here to actively represent young people's views on a panel like this. So, as you say, the Youth Council ran a survey last year after the UK's first major lockdown under the hashtag of Youth Consult 2020. The primary focus of the survey was on education, as that was where much of the disruption caused by COVID on young people was. However, it also touched on issues of mental health, family life, and support for young people post-pandemic. So on the education side of things, many students felt that a lack of face-to-face teaching and extracurricular activities severely impacted their learning. Older students were also concerned about the impact on exams and felt very uncertain about their next steps in life. And that's something the council have acted on by expanding the number of targeted youth entrepreneurship programs to make sure that young people have lots of pathways to employment. And another major issue, which has briefly been brought up, is that of digital exclusion, with many young people not having the resources, the training, or the data to access online learning, which set them even further back than their peers. And although most young people in the UK are back in school physically now, we recognise that digital inclusion is an ongoing issue. So the Council is continuing its work in distributing data and recycled laptops to those who are most in need for learning and job opportunities. On the more in terms of mental health, young people felt a great deal of anxiety around COVID from the survey. This was a number of factors contributing to this: the stressful environment of school previously mentioned, the negative impact on families, jobs and finances causing general stress, as well as real anxiety and uncertainty about when COVID was going to end and their place in the future, building on top of prior anxieties around things like the climate crisis and rising youth unemployment and an unstable housing market. So to tackle this, ongoing support, because obviously the mental health impacts of COVID are continuing even now. The Council are working on delivering mental health and well-being support programs through schools that they've distributed to schools, which include a bereavement support as well, those young people who lost people during the pandemic. But most of all, the survey reinforced the need to really listen to young people's views on how COVID has impacted them. It exposed how they've had a truly unique experience of the pandemic, not necessarily any better or worse off than any other group of people, but certainly unique. And as we move into sort of a recovery phase and we continue to grapple with the long-term consequences of COVID, it's very important to remember young people in those discussions and to put their voices at the heart of what we do.
Thank you, John. You said it so well, and this leads us to our next speaker, a neighbor, actually, Denis Leamy. I hope I said it correctly.
Yeah,
is the Chief Executive of Cork Education and Training Board in Ireland, overseeing a range of community national schools, post-primary schools, further education and training services, and youth services. And here at the OECD, he chairs the Local Employment and Economic Development Committee. Denis, I understand that you actually started your career as a youth officer. What are you doing in Cork to better link education and training with the world of work? And how has COVID-19 crisis sparked new initiatives or innovations?
Thanks very much, Sana, and it's great to be here and to listen to the other contributions, in particular John's contribution there at the before me in relation to the issues that I suppose we were all working on and combating during the COVID crisis. I suppose just to give a little bit of context, in Ireland, education and training boards, we have a central role in supporting youth employment through education, training, upskilling, and education. We also have responsibility for out-of-school education and supporting young people back into school and education. But could just maybe give two brief examples, just conscious of time in terms of the types of response that we were engaged in Cork. I suppose we very firmly learned, through this crisis, and I think a number of the contributors already reflected that mental health and resilience were really key in terms of supporting during these last 18 months, and in particular in relation to young people. We worked very closely with other agencies and community organisations and statutory agencies in a response to this. So in Cork, we very much worked on the combined efforts to try and make a difference to support young people during this challenging time. So we devised what we called at the time We Are Cork Youth Challenge, and also urban outdoor activities, which were in partnership with the local authorities in Cork City Council, Cork County Council, and the local music generation, sports partnerships. And through that, in 2020, when everything was shut down, we brought our outdoor education centre, which is very much situated along the wide Atlantic Way, was very inaccessible to young people and centres in the city due to travel restrictions and everything closed. But we developed the Urban Outdoor Initiative in the city, where instead of kayaking on the oceans, young people had the opportunity to take to the river in the city. and across the parks in the city. So a lot of young people took part in that during the 6 weeks. Outdoors, looking at involved in soccer on the green, in housing estates, kayaking the River Lee, campcraft in the city parks. So young people got to experience the wild outdoors in their lived environment. So the real learning for us from that as educators was giving young people the personal development tools in their own communities, in the areas and places that were familiar to them. Often we think about taking people out of their environments or out of their communities, when what we should be doing is showing them the strength, the beauty, and the resources of where they live and the assets that are all around them. So we very much created all those connections, but it's been very much a coordinated approach. Just as a second example was in relation to, we brought a number of organizations together around the Sustainable Development Goal of 4, around education for all. And we looked at mitigating against educational disadvantage. So we worked with the local authorities again, with the universities and ourselves to deliver quality education and lifelong learning opportunities for young people during this time. So it was a network across employers, industry, arts, culture, learners and young people, just reflecting some of the contributions already. And we looked at things that support our critical skills for life in terms of citizenship, participation, work and prosperity across communities, and in essence, developing social capital. So we've had a number of webinars over the course of the year, which have looked at the asset-based approach, the community asset-based approach in terms of looking at your community, working with employers, like we've had employers like Johnson & Johnson involved, we've had the local chamber involved, along with the schools and the formal education providers, the youth workers, the young people and the higher education. And then we had a webinar as well about linking access to the workplace, how you link education and training with the workplace, like creating access routes within the workplace through a focus group where partners explore good practice, challenges, opportunities. And we looked at the whole training area, everything through apprenticeships. And then we looked at developing an access charter for Cork, which involved the employers, the education providers, the community organizations. And that very much looked at improving access for all people to work experience, especially placements for non-traditional students, students from migrant backgrounds, students from traveller backgrounds, students that might normally get the opportunity for that work placement, and putting them in connection with the employers and training education providers. So that's just a couple of examples of the types of things we're engaged with. But I suppose what we've learned from that is that's not just a one-off activity now. It needs to be something that we continue, that we grow. And I suppose we're looking at things in a different way in terms of responding to that whole piece around mental health, resilience, and improving the capacity and participation of young people in the workforce. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you, Dennis, for sharing that. It takes a network of approach. It takes many actors. It takes engaging youth themselves to really build the support systems and keep the connections between and among. Our next speaker is Marita Raisanen. She's the coordinator of a one-stop shop guidance center for young people in Jyväskylä, Finland. Marita has worked for over 20 years in different roles serving youth in Jyväskylä, including as a social worker in secondary vocational education and training, and with young people struggling with addiction and drug abuse, as well as justice-involved youth. So she brings a wealth of experience to this conversation. Marita, the one-stop guidance center for young people, is widely regarded as an international best practice model for providing integrated services for youth. What do you think makes this model work so well?
Thank you. There are, of course, quite a many reasons for that, but because we have limited time to use here, I pick up some of the main reasons from my point of view. There are more than 60 one-stop guidance centers in Finland by now. And first of all, I think that one-stop guidance centers services are very easily accessible for the young people. The services are low threshold services. this means that you don't necessarily have to do an appointment in advance. Instead, you can just jump in when you feel like it during the opening hours, of course. You can pick up the time to visit us and decide when you are ready to face your problems or share these matters or issues, thoughts of your life where it would be good to get help and some support from us. Also, you can come and visit One Stop Guidance Center by yourself alone, with your friend, with your family member or other relative or so on. The main thing is that it's up to you and you can decide it. Secondly, and actually this is very crucial, one-stop guidance centers are definitely not obligatory, but you can use our services voluntarily. Young people cannot be forced to use services of one-stop guidance centers. So young people have the freedom to choose to come to us or not. The very important point also is that a young person who comes to us feels that she or he truly benefits from our services, which means in practice that the multi-competent staff offer them help, support and guidance. And that is why one-stop guidance centers are multidisciplinary. By multidisciplinary services, we can really provide a service point which offer information, advice, guidance, and support in various matters, such as education and student counseling, employment things, housing, money matters, well-being, and so on. So you can say that the aim of the centers is to bring together different service providers, such as employment offices, the social and healthcare sector, educational institutions, youth services, and the third sector too. One more thing, the other reason I would like to share with you is that services are free, they are free of charge, and everyone under the age of 30 is welcome to visit us, whether you are a student, at work, or unemployed, on maternity, or on sick leave, and etc. So, yeah. Thanks.
Thanks, Marita. Having a place and feeling like you have a place in the city outside of school, outside of your home is certainly important for all of us. And it's great to see that this one-stop guidance center exists and how young people can access it. And as John said, the uncertainty and the anxiety that the uncertainty produced and showcased in the survey, it's a great resource. So all the resources that you are providing, the digital, the physical, the nature, is really important as we move forward to a recovery program. And how do we keep some of these things going? So just for the audience, please feel free to engage and direct your questions to the question and answer section of the webinar. But before we move on, we want to see and engage with you through a poll and find out how your cities are putting supports forward to youth. So if we could launch the poll, and we'll see. So what measures have been taken in your city to support young people during the COVID-19 crisis? Providing immediate assistance through food aid, social care support, and emergency housing, facilitating access to IT equipment to support students and learning, supporting young people in their transition into the labor market, promoting new and broader forms of youth democratic participation and youth engagement in decision-making on local policies. So what are some of the interventions that you are aware of in your city to support young people? And I see the results are coming in, maybe about 10 more seconds while we get the numbers. We have about almost 50% of audiences responses. What measures have been taken in your city to support young people during the COVID-19 crisis? And I think we have a good set. So let's end the poll and we can see some of the results. So everyone can see, it seems like number one is supporting young people in the transition into the labor market at 65%, followed closely by providing immediate assistance through food aid, social support, and emergency housing. And then not too distant about facilitating IT equipment to help students learn, and of course, promoting broader forms of youth democratic engagement. So these are all interesting themes that have come up in the policy note and then also during this discussion today. So thank you, everyone, for participating. Let's move on to the second half of our discussion. And I bring the question around to you, Mayor Danielsson. The mental health, and we've spoke about this a lot in the first half of the session, of young people has been significantly impacted by the COVID-19 crisis. Could you share some of the measures you've taken to mitigate the impact and to promote youth well-being?
Well, thank you. First of all, I want to stress that the mental health of young people was already an issue of concern pre-COVID. It was a growing public health challenge for us even before COVID. But that said, COVID has intensified the issue. And we know that being physically and socially active is positive for our well-being in many ways. And in order for young people to keep active during the COVID, we had to rely heavily on the city's well-established connections with local associations, clubs, and NGOs. And we have increased the city's economic support for the civil society during the pandemic to make sure that their activities could continue. And the city's own activities and the meeting places that we have for young people have also adapted their way of working during this time. Digital platforms such as Snapchat and Instagram has been used for social interaction. And we have also worked more with outreach and pop-up activities in our different city districts. And we have also set up a phone line where young people could talk to an adult for support if they needed. And even before COVID, as I said, we observed an increase in stress and mental illness, especially among young people in our city. And our research identified that many people feel disconnected from society, and the lack of everyday contacts and platforms for expressing their feelings and discussing deeper emotional topics was big. And during the height of the corona restrictions, the city initiated a project we call Talk About Life, to develop tools and models for how we can increase and enhance these discussions. And more than 200 young children and young professionals have been involved in the process. It's high school children, sport and leisure clubs, and our employment center, and several of our civil society organizations has been involved. And today, Helsingborg is almost back in the same levels of youth unemployment as we were in 2018. But because of COVID, many of the young people aged between 15 and 18 lost their chance for summer work in the tourist sector last year here in Helsingborg. And as a result, we made a decision to increase the number of summer jobs within the city's organization. And one group of summer workers were involved in developing the process for this initiative, Talk About Life. and they took outstanding ownership of this process during the summer, and some of them are actually working part-time for the city now. So we have young people training our professional staff and developing platforms for dialogue and influence. And this project, Talk About Life, I feel that it fills the void in the work with promoting mental health. It empowers young people to be agents of change in their own city, and it forms a new organic path to communicate with our youth. And we see this as an important step in promoting a feeling of belonging, and that bears hope in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Danielsson. Very impressive project, and that you were able to use actually City Hall as a training center for some youth and employ. That's really interesting and inspirational. And really hits on my second question, actually, for Thomas Rogé. There's evidence that the systematic social and economic challenges that are prominent among young people, even before the crisis, including underemployment, low wages, stagnant job market, rising student debt, and affordable housing have been exacerbated by the COVID-19 crisis. In Paris, there's this initiative, Maison pour la Jeunesse, House of Youth, as an important component of Mayor Hidalgo's strategy to overcome these challenges. Could you share with us some of the services offered to young people through this initiative and how these services support young people in their transition to the labor market?
Yes, sure. What is very important and interesting is that there is a lot of similarities about Maison pour la Jeunesse and what Marita speak about in her country. So to address the situation caused to young people by the pandemic, Hidalgo, the mayor of Paris, asked us to open Maison pour la Jeunesse, Maison de la Jeunesse this year. And so we opened at the beginning of September a new facility, new public facility called QG, which is a pun on Quartier Général and Jeunes, meaning headquarters and young people in French. And it opened in a very beautiful 19th century building in the center of Paris, just facing the Louvre Museum in the first district of Paris. And it's a public facility designed for young people from 16 to 25, but in a very inclusive way. Access is free. There is no appointment needed. You don't have to show proof of age or proof of residence. You can live in Paris, you can study in Paris, you can just passing by, you are welcome. And it's aimed to high school students, students in college, young professionals, young workers, and all those who are not in school, training, or employment. All are welcome. And QG provides integrated services for young people to access information, and mainly information about field of career guidance, employment, professions. But you can also find information on health, housing, civic engagement, culture, sports, leisure, and so on. There is, at this time, more than 20 partners inside QG, and it's very interesting because in a big city like Paris, you have many stakeholders who develop actions toward young people, the state, the city, the metropolitan area, private partners, NGOs, and it's very difficult to coordinate all these partners. And in a way, QG it's a way to cheat and to put them in one place and giving them the opportunity to work together, toward answers and solutions to difficulties or problems meted by young people. So in QG, each week you can find private businesses who seek young workers. You can work on your resume. You can have a refresher course on your studies. You can meet a lawyer. You can meet a lot of professionals to be guided in all the questions you can have or difficulties you can have when you are young people. But it's not a sad place. It's a very happy place. It's a place it's a place designed with young people, for young people. We ask them how to build all places inside the building, what services they needed, and what place they wanted to have the governance of the facilities. And so on a daily basis, we work with young people to make this place like a place between school, between home, a third place for young people, for very serious topics, very serious issue, especially in about work, employment, as you said, but also a place when you can come by even when you needed nothing. Just because you are welcome, you want to use the Wi-Fi, you want to have a coffee, you want to, in a very near future, have a beer, even. It's a very welcoming place, and it's just the beginning, because we opened just a few weeks ago at the 1st of September, but already there is more than 1,000 people each week in QG. So there is a lot of needs. It seems that we are not totally wrong about it, but it's a work in progress, and I will be very happy to speak with it with Marita to exchange some views about how we can work together to share some tips and working tips to make QG a better place.
Thank you, Thomas, and for sharing this new venture in the city of Paris, opening up this very important space that has captured already thousands of users. So this is amazing. I move to our next speaker, John. You have a question I think you've answered already in the Q&A about if there were any disparities between the respondents of the survey. And so you can answer that too. But John, if you could tell us more about your role as youth mayor and how this elected body ensures that young voices are heard as the city recovers from the pandemic and the impact on youth.
Sure, yeah. So just to say, while the survey itself didn't actually sort of look that much in detail at social disparities, there are obviously impacts, and you can refer to the answer in the Q&A for a little bit more detail. So in terms of the Youth Council and the Youth Mayor, starting with the Youth Council, we are a group of 32 young people from around Bristol who are elected by the wider young people of Bristol, usually every 2 years. Ballots are sent around to schools and youth groups, and then youth councillors who put themselves forward for and run on certain campaign issues are elected that way. And we also have 5 co-opted members who are brought on from various equalities groups around the city. So that group helps to represent the young people's views from the council, and it also works to internally elect the 2 youth mayors. Right now it's myself and the other youth mayor, Alice, and we also have our 2 members of UK Youth Parliament. So for the youth mayors specifically, our role is to act as spokespeople for the perspective of the Youth Council and for young people in general at events, board meetings, and panels like this one. It also involves monthly meetings with the Mayor, Marvin Rees, to develop two-way support between young people and city leadership. We also have personal youth mayor campaigns we work on, such as I'm doing a project right now around youth transport and walking and cycling. And we also run the International Youth Mayors Association, which is a group of young leaders from around 10 countries around the world who meet to discuss various issues that we share despite our geographical distances. So as youth mayors, we've also been involved in Bristol's One City approach. So the One City approach is a way of bringing together various partners from around the city to collaborate and share best practice and work for the betterment of everyone in the city. So I co-chair the One City Children and Young People's Board. So that brings together representatives from the public, private, voluntary, and third sectors who are all involved in youth work. And that's a great resource to bring together all of these different viewpoints to help tackle shared issues for young people around the city. And additionally, every year at the refresh of Bristol's One City plan at the city gathering, the Youth Council gets to decide one of the key 3 priorities that the city is going to focus on tackling that year. So this year, the topic is digital exclusion, which we touched on earlier, and previously it's been on tackling period poverty. So one thing I wanted to say is that this system of an elected youth council, given a mandate by the young people of Bristol, and the youth mayors, all tied directly to local government, is, in my opinion, quite very successful in creating pathways to youth engagement in public life and local politics. On a wider scale, it allows Bristol's youth to be involved in democracy and in electing people. And whilst for the individual youth councillors, it provides a wealth of experience around local politics, public speaking, campaigning, all valuable skills. And especially the role of youth mayors as spokespeople is very useful in getting youth voices at specific events. It's a system that I would very much recommend to any local area that wanted to further their engagement with young people. And with regards to the youth mayors, even if your local government doesn't have an elected mayoral figure the same way that Bristol does, just the idea of having spokespeople, 2 or 3 youth spokespeople backed up by central government to go out and represent youth views is a very effective way to make sure our voices are being heard on a citywide level or on a local level.
Thank you, John, and for explaining the importance that having a seat at the table and having these formal structures that allow the youth voice to be heard, especially in the local politics and plans. I move to our next speaker, Denis. Putting on your hat as the chair of OECD's Local Employment and Economic Development Committee, why is it important to approach these issues from a local perspective? And what gets left out when we only think about them in terms of national policies and programs?
Thanks very much, Sana. Yeah, I think we've heard good descriptions here from the different contributors in terms of why local is so important, because of the different responses that local organizations, local agencies, local municipalities have made in different, to the situations that they've found themselves in. And I think it's really important that if you focus, for example, if you focus on youth employment and school to work transitions, like this is a very important work of our committee. So a lot of that policy will be set nationally, but in terms of implementing it, it's often carried out at the subnational and at the municipal level. So then they fall under the competence of subnational governments. So in about half of the OECD countries, subnational governments actually have some type of formal competence for active labour market policies. So for example, municipalities in countries such as Denmark, or where responsibilities are shared across a number of different levels of government, for example, as in Italy. So if we look at serving particular populations such as youth or people in receipt of social welfare, local governments even often have a larger role to play And looking beyond employment in many cases, local governments are responsible for other policy domains. For example, education policies that impact the school to work transitions, the physical and mental health services that we've been reflecting and talking about here, because I suppose there's a recognition that there are multifaceted barriers that a lot of young people face, and where best to address them, but at the local and with the local institutions interacting. So, and I think there's going to be a good reflection, and John reflected it very well in terms of how the young person's voice can address the local realities for young people, because it enables the local institutions and organizations are in a better position to listen to young people, to engage with young people, and then to put in responses to the needs that young people are outlining. Also, there are disparities in terms of whether you're in an urban area or a rural area. I think you're facing different aspects, and that blanket national policies mightn't necessarily be able to take into account because of the different realities that young people face. So, for example, in rural areas, there's bigger challenges in achieving critical mass and the economies of scale and delivering services, as well as fewer job opportunities in those areas. Whereas in urban areas, there's higher shares of young people with a whole range of different backgrounds, migrant backgrounds, which require providers to have a different set of competences and cultural understanding in terms of engaging young people. And finally, local agencies have I think the closest connections with employers. I mean, we spoke about it earlier on, you know, just knowing the local employers, the community and social community organizations, the social economy organizations, and each area has its own dynamic and expert role or set of areas that it's most expert on. And they're key to improving the outcomes for young people in terms of employment. So it's really important to engage with employers, especially around the quality of jobs, because that's a big issue, and we've had an opportunity to look at that over the last while. Also in designing training and education pathways in each of the areas more generally, to make sure that they're aligned with the local labour market situation. And then when it comes to social economy or community organisations, they're often the trusted organisations. I mean, as much as the state organisations, we like to think we're trusted, and we do our best to work along to be trusted. But community organisations are really bedded in to the communities. So it's very important that we work in partnership with them, because they have connections very clearly, often in marginalised communities, in disconnected communities, and are in a better position because of the relationship building to reach out to young people in those areas. So that's, I suppose, you asked me the question, what the type of work we do, why is it local? That's why the work of the committee that I'm fortunate to chair in terms of local employment and economic development is critical to build that bridge between the national and the local, so that it just helps to help governments at all levels in terms of implementation and tailoring national policies to local conditions to achieve better outcomes for young people. Thanks very much, Stan.
Thank you, Dennis. That was a perfect transition as we've spoken about some of the local initiatives that are happening in place and why they're able to happen because of this connection with the local job environment, with the constituents, and being able to have that nuance to be able to provide the best services and meet the needs. Marita, you have a question in the Q&A, and I think you've answered, but one is if the one-stop guidance program had a mental health counseling component. And the other question I have is that the OECD often touts the importance of of better integrating services for youth and other disadvantaged populations. But this is often easier said than done. Marita, why do you think these types of multidisciplinary services for youth are so important? And what can other places learn from your experience in working across different organizations and agencies with different cultures, budgets, and objectives?
Yes, if you think of this COVID-19 era, the corona pandemic has increased the loneliness of young people and increased pressure of young people in many levels in their lives. Many young people have been left alone with their problems, or at least some of them feels like it. I think that if we really want to provide and offer young people these easily accessible services, these low threshold services, and also reach easily, for instance, these needs. And if we really want to reach out all kind of young people, it is wise to offer them these one-stop guidance center-like services. Of course, we already know by some studies, surveys, and research that for some young people, such as the homeless, or these needs, or those who just want to do a pop-up visit to us, one-stop guidance center services are really easier for them to use and to reach. And the idea of this one door, many services is one of the most important reasons why young people come to us. And in fact, I don't believe it's about money. It's more the matter of attitude when you're thinking of this, building up this one-stop guidance center. The right attitude and willingness to do things together, share things, collaborate. This is something what leadership level, management level, managers, directors should understand too. You don't have to hire new employees at all. Just service providers can just transfer employees into this one-stop guidance center. And this is how we did it in Jyväskylä when the center, our one-stop guidance center, was established in 2015. And by the way, one-stop guidance centers receive their funding from the states and municipalities here in Finland. I think strongly that you have to be where the young people are, where they hang out, where they are spending their free time, and so on. And that is why we also sometimes do this outreaching work on the streets, or we might hop on a youth van which drives around the suburban areas and outside the downtown and city center. And I'm happy to hear so many talks about these digital services and online services here in this panel too, because that's something we cannot really forget when we are dealing and working with young people. I think together we are strong, and we can success when we don't have to run young people all over the services. Everyone has the right to participate in society and enjoy a good everyday life. And hey, we can always benchmark each other's, like Thomas earlier mentioned already. And one more thing I would like to share with you is that the one-stop guidance centers are developed in cooperation by different ministries, by different 3 ministries here in Finland. And the ministries are the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Employment, the Ministry of Education and Culture, and the Ministry of Social Affairs and Health. It is very important that all these ministries support one-stop guidance centers. Thank you.
Thank you, Marita. And also building on what Denis said about the national and local perspectives and the importance, but also that the national level is helpful in supporting the one-stop guidance center. So thank you. We are almost at the end of the webinar, but I want to draw everyone's attention to the chat. The speakers, our panelists, have shared information about the programs that you've heard about today. So please make sure to reference and click through the links there. But before we end, and thank you all, I would like to give the floor to my colleague, Anna Rubin, the manager of OECD's Local Development Forum, for the closing remarks.
Thank you so much, Senna, and thank you to all of our panelists. It was really an interesting discussion. It's great to see all these different perspectives come together. We don't often have political leaders, practitioners, and young people all around the same table, so it's really been interesting. I just want to briefly wrap up by reflecting on 3 of the points from the discussion. So first, if we really want to improve outcomes for youth, we have to think local. Success of any policy, whether it's national or local in scope, ultimately depends on the quality of its local implementation, on how street-level bureaucrats like Marita interact with and engage with young people, on how well it fits within the broader range of policies and programs already available in a local community for young people. In 2019, the OECD did a youth governance survey, and 55% of responding ministries at the national level reported that decentralizing the delivery of youth programs and services is a priority for them. So I think it's fair to say that this local level is only going to become more important. Second, integrating youth voices into the policymaking process has to be about more than just lip service. We heard some really great concrete examples today from, our youth mayor, John Wayman, and thank you again so much. I think you're an inspiration for everyone on this panel today, from Mayor Danielsson, from Rogé, about how with the right structures in place, youth can really influence and improve the quality of public services. And I really like this framing that we have to think about youth not just as users of public services, but also as co-creators. And again, it's at that local level where this youth can have the most direct lines of influence. And finally, it's a bit of a cliche admittedly, but it really does take a village. No single ministry or level of government has all the tools and resources to tackle these challenges on their own. And there's really a need not only to work across policy portfolios, but also to engage other types of community stakeholders, from employers to the social economy to community organizations. But as discussed, this is often easier said than done because of different organizational cultures or attitudes, budgets, and accountability frameworks. But again, it was really interesting to hear some really concrete examples from Marita, Thomas, and Denis about how this can concretely be done and what we can learn from their experiences. So as Senna mentioned, this is the first joint discussion that we've organized between the OECD Champion Mayors for Inclusive Growth Initiative and the OECD Local Development Forum. And I think we can say it really hit this kind of sweet spot, highlighting the importance of having the strong evidence base, which is what the OECD is really known for kind of building that political will within mayors and other leaders, and really that kind of practical know-how that our Local Development Forum members bring to the table. So I really hope we can continue this exchange and discussion going forward, and we can continue to use this framing of an asset-based approach that I think a lot of our panelists talk about. And if you're interested in learning more about the Local Development Forum, I'll add a link in the chat, and I think there's already a link in there to the OECD Champion Mayors Initiative. So please continue to engage with us, reach out. We're looking forward to continuing the discussions. Thank you so much, Senna.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you to all our speakers, Mayor Danielsson, Thomas Rogé, John Wayman, Denis Leamy, Marita Raisanen. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for sharing your experiences and your wealth of knowledge of really providing the supports, the wraparound services for youth to be empowered in the future, and how youth are a part of the recovery plans post-COVID. And thank you for always checking in with your youth and inviting them to the table, building spaces for them, letting them lead initiatives within the city halls and on city streets. So with that, I thank everyone for tuning in. Please engage with us through the Champion Mayors platform, through the Local Development Forum platform. If you have any ideas on discussions you'd like to see in the future, reach out to us via email. I thank everyone. I thank Anna for your contribution and collaborating with us on this Inequality Matters webinar. And thanks everyone for tuning in. Until next time.
Thank you.